How long do you think it takes to make a fossil? Hi, it's Calvin Smith here, and welcome to Creation Basics, where our goal is to make God's creation part of your everyday conversation. Today's question is this: how long do you think it takes to make a fossil? Well, if you grew up like I did, taught in our state-run schools here in Canada, you'd likely have a quick answer. Well, it's millions of years, of course. You see, I grew up learning the typical evolutionary stories party line regarding rocks and fossils, that slow fossilization ideas were true and that fossils were millions of years old. And of course, I read books with detailed diagrams showing that fossils formed mostly when animals and or plants died in watery environments. And there'd often be, references to former inland seas from millions of years ago, of course, in the area where the particular fossil being discussed was found. And of course, I could easily recite the standard example of how fossils form to any adult that would bother to take the time to listen to me. Now, I'd typically use the kind of canned example I'd seen and heard so often. A fish, for example, according to the typical series of pictures that I'd seen depicted in a wide assortment of books. A fish would die and then it would sink to the bottom of a lake and get slowly covered in layers of silt and mud. And then as millions of years would pass, the sediment got compressed. As new layers gathered, the mud would turn into rock and the fish would then become permineralized. And voila, it became a fossil. And so convincing was this seemingly scientific process that I never seemed to compare it to what I'd actually observed dead fish doing, sitting on the bottom of the Atlantic, at the end of one of the wooden docks I'd sat on, feet dangling over the water in Newfoundland. If I'd just taken a few seconds to think about it, I would have easily realized that what my own eyes observed is that dead fish tend to float and bloat. And the ones that were at the bottom, were chewed up by crabs and little nippers quite quickly. And even the bones, they didn't last that long. I realize now that I'd been taught what to think, not how to think. And I never heard anyone challenge these ideas in any classes I was in. And like me, due to that widespread evolutionary indoctrination in the school system, most people, even Christians, still believe that it takes millions of years for rocks to form, because when you hear about fossils, it's generally within the context of hundreds or thousands or millions of years. Indeed, a recent news article on fossils that had been made in a lab began with this: "Fossils are certainly fascinating, but they do take rather a long time to form." It later adds, "Over the course of anywhere from tens of thousands to millions of years, the bones turn to stone." But what did the lab-made fossils really demonstrate? Well, they showed it doesn't take a rather long time to form. Surprise, surprise. It doesn't take millions of years to form fossils. Scientists were able to make fossils from fresh specimens in just 24 hours, in just one day. And by the way, not the kind of day our fellow believers who say the days in Genesis were millions of years long, but just like the kind of day that Genesis actually speaks of, a literal 24-hour day. All it took were the right conditions, which were mostly heat and pressure. And scientists are hoping these quick-forming fossils will help them discover more about other fossils. Now, interestingly, these lab-made fossils are virtually identical to naturally forming fossils, they would term them as, even when the scientists looked at them under a scanning electron microscope. And scientists found some of the same features in these fossils as in natural ones, such as melanosomes, the structure that contain melanin and give feather and skin their color. And the article also notes that less stable materials like proteins and fatty tissues don't show up in real fossils, and they weren't present in the synthetic fossils either. This research is fascinating and points towards something creationists have been saying for decades. It doesn't take long ages to form fossils. Under the right conditions, which the flood of Noah's time would have created, fossils can form quickly. And remember, to make a fossil requires a catastrophic event. The plant or animal needs to be covered quickly to be preserved. So, how long does it take to make a fossil? Well, we've observed it happen in less than a day. Again, under the right conditions, which the flood of Noah's time would have created, fossils can and do form very rapidly indeed. If you're appreciating this content, visit the answersingenesis.ca website for much more. Please consider donating to the ministry, and whatever platform you're accessing this on, it likely has some combination of features that allow you to subscribe or like or share, and we'd appreciate you taking the time to do so because it's probably the best thing you can do to help us continue to do outreach. Until next time, I'm Cal Smith. Blessings to you.